Welcome to the Longevity CEO podcast, where we dive into the science of living healthier, longer lives, share real-time stories of resilience, and discover actionable strategies to help you lead with impact and purpose. Because being the CEO of your health and longevity starts today. What's up, everybody? Greg Shindler, Longevity CEO. Today's guest, Dr. Mike Stone. All fairness, I have not known Dr. Mike that long, but there's a bromance that has developed early, and we went from talking about this one project to these weekly calls now where we check in, and I'm like, look, I've got to have you on the Longevity CEO in the podcast. And I got to tell you something else I don't think I've ever told you. You're that kind of guy that what is it, like the low self-esteem part of me, like, really wants to hate, like, when I first, find out about you, because as people are going to learn, you're like, had this badass Ivy League education, doctor, you play bass in a band, you climb mountains, you do all this really, and then you're just an awesome world-class human being. And it's like, I've gone from really wanting to hate this guy because I don't, like, what have I done with my life, to, damn, I think I've really got a bro crush on this dude. So that's it. Dr. Mike, welcome.
Oh my God, Greg.
How's that
Yeah,
for
I mean,
a setup?
the bromance is mutual, as you're well aware. And I will say we have a mutual friend who was involved in introducing us, and shout out to Charlie. But one of the things that I don't know if I told you this, but one of the things that happened with my relationship with Charlie was just like mine with you, which is like, it starts off as a phone call. It's maybe going to be like 20 minutes. I don't know. We'll see if there's like something there. Maybe it's transactional, maybe it's not, whatever. And then like that 20-minute phone call ends up being like an hour and a half phone call. And at the end, you decide it doesn't matter if there's anything transactional. We're just going to be friends.
Yeah.
And this is awesome. And then it always ends up growing into more than that anyway. But yeah, the bromance is real, and plenty of flaws. So you can find something to hate if you're looking for it.
That's a fact. We were talking about that this weekend. My partner Hillary and I were walking somewhere, and I'm like, man, if you're looking for something to hate, it's everywhere, right? It's come. But when you're really trying to like find something to love about yourself, or, sort of receive something about yourself, boy, it seems to be pretty scarce. It seems to be a lot harder to find than, yeah, screw that guy. I don't like this. I don't, yeah. So if you're looking for something to hate, it's everywhere.
We're not going to go into politics, but I'll tell you that somehow my wife ended up on the receiving end of different texts every day from one of the political campaigns in advance of the election, and they're all from different phone numbers, so she can't unsubscribe, and like, it's just, she probably gets like 30 of these a day. And they're all like all caps vitriol hatred. And I just had this thought that, like, we were mailing something together today, and she was looking for the address that somebody had texted her, and she literally had to, like, it took her 10 minutes because she had to scroll through all the junk political text to be able to find the text from like 2 days ago. And I just had this feeling like, wow, what if you got bombarded with like Rumi quotes from a text message?
Yes.
Like different phone numbers, you couldn't unsubscribe, you were just like unintentionally being showered with love and affirmation all day long. And I don't know that there's any funding for that. It'd be an interesting PAC that'd be funding that, but it's amazing how, like, just how easy it is to be affected by just, rampant hatred being flooded into your inbox or your phone.
That's
Every
what
day.
sells. It gets people emotionally charged. You give me a story and I'll give you a war. I think it was William Randolph Hearst that, said that to a reporter who went down to some conflict, or there was supposed to be a conflict. And he wrote back and he said, there's no story here. There's nothing going on. There's a few people throwing rocks at each other. And he's like, you give me a story and I'll give you a war. And, it was, hey, is it true what the other side's saying about you? Like, what? What are they saying?
Totally.
And then you go to the other side and say, wow, man, that's, this has got to be harsh to hear this. And like, what are they saying? Next thing you know, you've got a full blown escalated conflict, yeah, they just keeping people emotionally charged up, and it sells newspapers, magazines, and TV. I get those same
It's
things. So I'm on that same list, and I wake up and there's like a bunch of, unknown phone numbers with political stuff going on in it. I don't know how to get rid of it. It's terrible.
Yeah, I mean, she's got a million things that are really special about her, and one of them is she gets those. I think it bothered her for all of about like an hour, and then she was like, I'm just going to turn my phone notifications off entirely. And like, yeah, there's people who probably do want to reach me, but whatever.
Yeah,
And she's like, yeah, it's only like 3 or 4 more weeks till the election. I'll just turn it off, and like, I don't care about my phone. I'm like, you're amazing.
that's
That's
pretty
incredible.
awesome. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
All right, diving in. All right. So give us, let's do the origin story. Tell me a little bit about Dr. Mike Stone, growing up, med school, what went on there. I know there was some stuff happening there, and then we'll get to sort of nexus medicine, and then we'll get into the juicy stuff around, epigenetics and all the current science around health and wellness and functional medicine, and we'll do all that, and then I'll try to jump in with some personal anecdotes along the way. Does that
Sounds
sound
good.
good?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds great. Yeah, so origin story, born in New York, grew up in my parents moved when I was maybe a baby out to suburban North New Jersey. My dad's from Newark, New Jersey. My mom's from the Bronx. Both of them first generation American born to Polish and Russian immigrants. So I'll give you a cool, quick origin story background, which is Stone is not our family name. So my father's dad immigrated from Poland to England, and then there's this mystery of like somebody died, and he was able to take their visa. And it had something with Stone in the name, and then he ended up coming to the States, and he was a vaudeville dancer in like Yiddish Newark Jewish life, and changed his name to Sam Stone, which was his stage name. So
How
that's
cool is
where
that?
that's where Stone comes from. And we don't know anything really about the old country. Everybody was from towns that were obliterated in World War II, which was part of people trying to get out in advance of some of that stuff. And so quiet suburban upbringing. Got scooped off to a private day school for middle school and high school, because back in the day, my mother was an English teacher, and she taught at a private school that she started when I was in 6th grade. She started teaching there, and then they up until about 10 years ago, if you were a faculty there, your kids went for free. So they were like, that's it. You're going to this amazing school because it's free, and we're there, and we're driving out there anyway. I kicked and screamed. There was a dress code. I didn't like it. I didn't want to like leave my neighborhood friends and stuff. And at the
Yeah.
end of the day, it was an amazing experience. It was a great education. Super fortunate to have that kind of land the way it landed, and also introduced me to like a much more um, diverse community. Like there were kids from all kinds of different backgrounds and different ethnicities. Really developed my love for music. Played in a band. Started that in high school and continued for over a decade in different iterations. Went off to college. Yeah, that's my Ivy League thing. I went to Brown for undergrad. It was not as competitive to get in then as it is now. So I'll just throw that out there. Yeah, really kind of. Is this? Do we have like an explicit rating on the podcast? Are we able
No,
to?
this you can say whatever you want to say.
I can say whatever I want. Yeah, so I totally fucked off in college. Like I, did lots of things that any, curious and interested college student would do. Managed to graduate on time, and managed to get into like 3 of the 20 some odd medical schools that I applied for. I didn't manage to graduate on time in time to apply for medical school. Like I was just still getting my act together. So I worked for a year for the university doing like computer support and tech support stuff while I was taking my MCATs and applying for med school. And then this was like a big fork in the road. So I had two real options for med school. One was NYU, which it wasn't as competitive and as highly ranked back then, because I was not a good medical student. Not a good college student. I didn't get an interview at most places, and then I got interviews at multiple places where they were like, yeah, now that we've met you, nah, we're not that interested. So it wasn't, it's true. I swear to God, I went to Columbia Med School. I remember this exactly. I went down, I met with them. They asked me for a second interview and I went back, and then they were like, yeah, no, we don't want you. It's like, oh God, soul crushing. I didn't even really necessarily want to go. I was just like, that really hurts.
You've been working
Thanks,
that out
man.
ever since.
Yeah. Oh, now that you know me better, you don't want me. Awesome. And then the other one was UVA in Charlottesville. So it was this real fork in the road of like, think about two more different places to train in medicine, like one in East Side Manhattan and the other in Charlottesville. And I went to school in New York, and my med school experience was this very strange dichotomy of like I was a gunner in med school. Like I did really well. People like wanted my notes for things, and like I was winning awards, right? So like, ooh, I'm so great. I'm so accomplished. I'm so smart. And at the same time, I was like battling a hardcore addiction in med school while I was doing all of that. So it was this like deep shadow side mixed with like, well, if I could just achieve enough externally, that'll probably like offset whatever I'm doing in the rest of my life. So like pretty lost and pretty and really struggling at that phase, and not with the self-awareness to really know exactly how hard I was hurting at that time. So that was a really rough time for me, was medical school.
Well, thinking back, Dr. Mike, can you look back on sort of what was going on? Was there a self-sabotage thing happening there? Because you were killing it, you're doing well, but it feels like, if you're struggling with addiction or something, then something else is going on, something way down, beneath.
Yeah. Didn't really get down into the deep shadow work until like, I don't know, 20 years after that. So at the time, like zero insight, except
Oh, of
just a
course,
whole
yeah.
lot of like passive self-loathing and self-sabotage for sure. And then ultimately, there was some early childhood stuff, and there was like many men, some inability to actually like feel an emotion. Like what does it mean to actually have emotions and feel them and let them pass
Besides
through
anger.
as opposed to besides
Yeah.
anger, as opposed to just like stuffing them down into that endless well, because of course it'll all fit in there.
Doesn't
So
work out
yeah,
very well, does it?
yeah, how's that working out for you?
Right.
And yeah, so definitely lots of psychosocial stuff that had been unprocessed and just kind of repressed, that was coming out in the way it was coming out. But at the time, I just definitely didn't have that insight, and ultimately just really grateful that like I really did my best to try and not make it to 30. And I just turned 50 last week, and somebody was like, oh, you must feel so old. And I was like, are you kidding me? I'm like, I did it. I'm in bonus time. This is like, it's every day feels like bonus time. So it's
Amen.
yeah, it was a rough period, but one that I I think ultimately did it have to happen? I don't know. It happened. I think
Yeah.
I think it added a level of humanity to and compassion to my practice as a physician. I think just that Western allopathic medical society is built on this so often this patriarchal hierarchy of, the doctor's there in their white coat and knows what's right for you, and they're right and you're just under informed, or you're making the wrong decisions. There's this whole sort of like judgmental power dynamic in so much of Western healthcare. And I always felt like that, I mean, I have plenty of flaws, but judging people for their behavior as a clinician really wasn't one of them, because I was like, dude, I mean, who, pot, hello, pot, kettle, you so it was, I think it did deepen my practice as a clinician and make me feel, more for my people than if I hadn't had that experience.
Yeah, no, I think that's so true. I think a lot of people have experienced that, right? In Western medicine is, um, it feels impersonal, and I get it. I mean, we're not there to make friends, right? Doctors have to do a job, and patients need to be healed and stuff. But shit, sometimes just to see the brokenness in people, we all have, we've all been fragile. We've all been pushed or bent or broken, and sometimes just being able to see that adds that layer of empathy or compassion that, shit, man, that person just might need that day more than anything else, right? More than the diagnosis. It's just a little extra compassion and empathy.
And I think I'm trying to pull this quote up because this just came up the other day. And yeah, I'm going to read this. I'm going to read this in a second. But why can't your doctor be your friend? Right? Like, yes, we're not there. I understand your point, and you're not saying you can't. You're saying that, like, we're not there to make friends. We're there to have a transactional interaction where somebody's looking after your health. Sure, I get that. And at the same time, like, you think I think the best that Western medicine has a ton of amazing things it's done. I mean, like, hello polio, and like a million things that have just, antibiotics, right? I mean, there's great things that have come out of Western medicine, and I'm sure we'll dive in, like, the future and even the present, like, mind blowing, the advances that we're making. But from a clinical practice side, I think the pinnacle for us in the West was like the small town family doctor,
Yeah.
like, who didn't just know you. They knew your family. They knew your psychosocial situation. They knew things that were going on that were in your control, out of your control, impacting you directly, indirectly, and it was relational.
Yeah. If
And
grandpa drank too
that's
much. Yeah. 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 They knew it
right.
all.
They knew it all. And I think that, this is sort of a distinction between, I was talking about my ideal practice with a men's group that I'm in, out here in Oregon, and one of the guys said, "So I'm getting the feeling that, like, you don't really want to blur, you don't really want to separate work and life. Like, everyone talks about work-life balance, but what you're talking about is like building a community where it's also where you work, but like the lines are super blurry." And I was like, yeah, I guess, yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. I don't want it to feel like work. I want it to feel like I'm connecting with people who I want to connect with around their health and around anything else. And one of the other guys found this quote while we were talking, from Francois Chateaubriand. So, a master in the art of living draws no sharp distinction between his work and his play, his labor and his leisure, his mind and his body, his education and his recreation. He hardly knows which is which. He simply pursues his vision of excellence through whatever he's doing, and leaves others to determine whether he's working or playing. To himself, he always appears to be doing both, which I thought, first of all, wow. Second of
Yeah.
all, shout out to all of the women out there. Like, it's an old French guy. You could substitute herself for sure.
Sure.
So, it's a bit antiquated, but, um, that's living a life in flow to me, is like, yeah, is it work? Is it play? It's just,
The lines are blurred and I don't care.
yeah, yeah, it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't matter. Yeah. I love that. I think, that what is that, modern spin on that is, if you're doing something you truly love, you'll never work a day in your life, or something like
Mm.
that. If you find something you're passionate about, you'll never work a day in your life, or
Yep.
Do what you love, the money will fall. I don't know. There's a couple of different versions, but I like that one a lot better. It's
It's pretty
really,
sweet.
it's
What
really
was
fun.
I mean, I was even more impressed with the guy who found it, like in the middle of that, like, oh, you just had that like in your back pocket.
I
Oh, this
love
is a
that.
good time for a Chateaubriand quote. Okay, sure.
Yeah, let's back up and go. Wait, how did you? Yeah,
Yeah, where'd that come from?
yeah. How do you have that at your fingertips? That's pretty awesome. You know who's that's like is Dalton. Sorry, I know we're like talking
Oh,
about that.
yes,
Dalton's got
another
some like
mutual friend.
roomy quotes in his pockets that he pulls out at the absolute perfect moment. And you're like, this is why I love you. Sorry, we just kind of referred to somebody that the audience is going to be like, what are they talking about?
Yeah, they should know. The audience should know more about Dalton, but maybe
Yeah,
that's a
Dalton's a true
separate
healer
podcast.
and a true, yeah, true, amazing individual. All right, so you're finishing up med school. You get out of med school. Um, Struggled a little bit, but it feels like things turn around, right? You have a what I call not today moment where you just sort of like, this not today, right? These demons, this whatever it is that's got a power over me, not today. And I say that because I had one, right? I woke up one day, looked at myself in the mirror, and said, "Not today. Mm-mm. I'm done." Right? I think everybody has their, we've heard it a lot. Your elevator's going down, you decide where you get off, right?
Mm.
But one day you get off, and you're just like, I'm done. I don't want to see where the bottom of this thing is. This is as good. This is good for me in terms of a bottom. Do you remember that moment? Did you have that day? Did you have that?
Yeah, it was more of it's really interesting. It wasn't provoked. There was just a moment of and I mean, I'm not I don't have a deep
Provoked meaning
tr-
like it wasn't court ordered or, police cars
yeah,
surrounding the house and
yeah.
helicopters overhead.
Yeah, none of the black helicopters. Yeah,
Yeah.
are they here now? The no, it was I don't have a deep I mean, I have experience with 12 step, but I don't, it wasn't my path. But to borrow a phrase, like it was a moment of clarity that wasn't necessarily provoked by a specific occurrence or something that had happened recently. It was just a, what, where is this going? And like,
Is this serving me? Yeah.
yeah, can I just get off this ride? And it yeah, I mean, it makes it sound like it was easy to then get off the ride. It wasn't easy to get off the ride, but it was the it was the true desire to get off the ride is really what I needed. And everyone has their own journey and experience with recovery, and for me, that's really, at the end of the day, that's all I needed, was a deep desire to get off the ride.
Yeah.
And then it was, I certainly had help along the way, and it's not like I'm not trying to build a superhero story here. Like it was messy and it wasn't easy, but that was it. It was just like, yeah, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
And
My dad was that
in the
kind of guy.
same, oh yeah,
Yeah. He smoked when he was younger and just kind of woke up one day and said, "Yeah, I don't want to do this anymore." And then just never smoked again. He was
yeah.
just had that, I guess, sort of a mental fortitude or toughness that he just made a decision, and that's just how it was the next day. And that's pretty awesome. It's pretty badass. Not everybody can do that.
No, and I mean that's why I sort of hesitate around talking about it, because it does have this, it can be misconstrued as like, I think people should just be able to toughen up and get over whatever. Like
No,
it's
no,
not
no.
like
Yeah,
that.
no.
It just, for me, I was fortunate to want to get off the ride, and then I was fortunate to have just whatever sort of neurochemical, biopsychosocial model that I had developed over the years that let me go, yeah, I'm just gonna fucking do this. And then I went, I ran away. Basically, I went like as far as I could from New York, in the continental U.S., and went out and trained in emergency medicine out in Oakland, California, and was like, clean break. Let me just bounce. And of course, like lots of stuff that hadn't been processed. But I bet if I move to the other side of the country, it'll all be fine.
It won't follow you
But
there.
yeah, it won't follow me there. But ultimately, I was able to channel a lot of the unprocessed emotions and baggage into becoming the best doctor, I'm making air quotes if this isn't on video, that I could be, and just really working hard and kind of like diving into trying to learn what it meant to be a good physician. um, and it was, I mean, of all the things that I could think of, that we have some friends who might have run across an entire continent while in recovery. Like, that's good too. For me, I was like, I'm going to dive into medicine and just get really good at this shit. And that's going to be kind of my outlet for right now.
Yeah.
So that was where I channeled it.
So I love the blurb and the intake where you talked about one of the most positive life experiences, or the biggest impact in terms of a positive life experience. And you talked about turning around, leaving a coffee shop and turning around, and going back. Tell everybody what happened then, and because that feels like a pivotal moment, and do it in the timeline. Give us some context.
Yeah, so I was a second year resident in San Francisco. I was living in the Lower Haight. I was not taking care of myself, and this is definitely sort of part of the longer story. Is like, yeah, I went from really not taking care of myself in med school to just not, I went from anti-caring for myself to just not caring for myself, right?
Yeah.
So I ate like shit. I drank too much. I mean, wasn't drinking at the time, but like I was not exercising, not eating clean, not doing like anything good for me by the time I was a second year resident. Still
Was
smoking
this kind of part and
cigarettes.
parcel with the residency stuff where you're doing 18, 20-hour days, and it's just really hard to eat well and get good
Yeah.
sleep and do all the things we know now we have to be doing? I mean, doesn't that kind of come with the
So
territory?
our year of internship was the last year before they restructured work hours because they decided that it was inhumane. So I got through the last year of still being inhumane, and then they changed it. And Yeah, I mean, my first month in the hospital was 30 hours on in the hospital on call for trauma in Oakland, to 18 hours at home, to 30 hours in the hospital, 18 at home, 30 hours in the hospital, 18 at home, for 28 days. So that was just that was it. That's all you did.
Two things that strike me
Um,
about that. One, there's a little irony. You're doctors, and I mean, no, you're charged with helping people, and it was emergency medicine, so it's a little different. But we were supposed to understand health and what how we work. That's the first thing. There's a little bit of irony in there. The second thing to me is also 30 hours making life or death decisions. We know that in a fatigued state, right? Um, in a fatigue induced state, we don't. This thing doesn't always fire like it did on hour 1 and hour 28, right? I mean, is it feels
yeah, I
like
mean,
there
it was
feels like a
there were a
bad
lot of
design.
it was a really bad design. They changed it, right? They changed
Yeah.
it, but not until after that year. But not that I'm bitter, Greg. But they so I was overweight. I wasn't exercising. I wasn't taking care of myself. I wasn't sleeping nearly enough. That was probably, of all of those things, that was the one that was unavoidable, was not sleeping well enough. Well, actually the food was unavoidable too, because I was, you make next to no money as a resident physician, and
Yeah.
they have free food in the cafeteria, and it's the county hospital cafeteria in Oakland. It's like Cozy Shack rice pudding and like wing day or like ham hock day, right? I mean, it was just awful. So I'm in that state. That's who I am physically and sort of health wise at the time. I didn't own a coffee maker because I wasn't off enough to be able to make coffee and buy coffee at home. I would just get it at the hospital. But one day I woke up and I was like, I'm in the Lower Haight in my apartment. I'm going to go down and get some coffee at the coffee shop around the corner. And I went down to the coffee shop, and um, this wonderful Eritrean woman who owns the coffee shop, owns the cafe, and they have like live music at the back there. It's a really, really cool spot. She and I had become friends over the time that I had lived there. And I walked in, and she was speaking to this young woman who I walked in and the coffee shop owner introduced us, and we started chatting. I come to find out, I'm going to tell you a cool story about, like, this is her MO. She like hooks people up. I had no idea, but I just found this out like 3 weeks ago. That's not true, like 6 weeks ago. Anyway, um, my future wife, Anne, is the woman I get introduced to. We sit and talk for a minute. I'm pretty sure I had like a cigarette behind my ear and was like disheveled and had like just woken up and was probably like, it looked like all hell. And for whatever reason, she saw something in me. We started talking, and then I left, and I got like a block and a half, 2 blocks away, and I just had this moment where I was like, I got to go back and see if she's willing to like hang out with me some more, because I'm going to regret this. And I went back and I asked her out. I got her number. I called her later in the day and was like, let's go out. I think even when I went back, I was like, let's go out tonight. She's like, yeah, I don't want to do anything tonight. And then I called her later. She like totally pretended she didn't remember me from the coffee shop, which is pretty awesome. And then we went out that night, and I think what is it, 2024? We'll be married 20 years next year.
Wow.
So it was a like pivotal moment in my life that, like, talk about
You went with your
these
gut.
sort of like, well, and it went with my gut, but then also just like how fickle and how fickle the universe is, and how little we have a role in these just consequential things that happen, right? Like the number of things that had to line up for us to meet, but then also for me to like walk back, but then also for it to be the right timing. Like it was um yeah, it was really it was a pivotal moment in my life that I look at like my life now and our kids together, and I'm like, wow, like all I had to do was just keep walking, and none of that would have happened. And just how grateful I am that I had the wherewithal to turn around and go back. And then, just to put the pin on it, um, my older son turned 17 a couple of months ago. I took him down to San Francisco to take him to go see a big concert at Golden Gate Park, and just the two of us. We flew down in the morning, flew back the next morning, and we rented bikes in the city. And I biked him over to the cafe, and same owner is working at the front. And we went in, and she's like, oh my god, how long has it been? I'm like, oh my god, I can't believe you remember me. She's like, blah 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 blah. This is what happened from you introducing us. And she got to meet Jake, which was really special. And then she calls over a guy who's got to be like, I don't know, mid-20s, and she's like, hey, tell him what you told me. So I'm like, yeah, she introduced me to my wife, 23 years ago, 22 years ago. And he goes, she has been trying to set me up for like the last 3 weeks with this one girl. And I was like, oh my God, I thought I was special. But no, this is just what you do back there behind the counter, is you try and hook people up.
That's pretty awesome, though. Did you tell him you got to be like, do it, trust your gut?
I was like, she's pretty good at it, Yeah.
That's
Four
pretty awesome.
stars.
How long after y'all met till from the courtship to getting married?
We knew we were going to get married. I knew I was going to marry her like 2 days into, not even 2 days. Like I knew that night that I was going to marry her. We were engaged to be married like maybe 5 months
No, I love that.
later.
Yeah,
But yeah, it was like and in the same way that like I didn't think I was going to make it to 30, and I had no aspirations of doing that. I had no aspirations of getting married. I had zero aspirations of having kids. It just wasn't something that I thought that I wanted in my life. And then I met Anne, and I was like, oh, this is like what this is why people want to do this. Like,
yeah.
okay, I get it.
That's pretty awesome. All
Yeah.
right, so you're in San Francisco. Eventually, you migrate to Oregon. Yeah. Or
Oh
how long?
man, that's a long, windy path right there. You skipped a lot there,
Did
Greg.
it? Oh well, then I mean, fill us in.
I'll make it quick.
This
I'll
is
make it
your
quick.
story
So
to tell.
we and this is and the funny thing is, like, and I appreciate, like, I never talk about this stuff, and it's so not my actual story, right? These are all like the little things that have happened that, like, we describe ourselves with along the way. But like these are places I've lived and visited, and like chapters in my life. But we so I told you I kind of dug into like being good at medicine as sort of like my next distraction and use of my escape from like having to actually deal with like loving myself and like feeling emotions. So in the next phase after residency, I went into academic medicine. So I was like teaching and researching and publishing and that kind of thing. And we went from California to New York to California to Boston to where like that's the other sort of like, oh, you want to hate me because I was Harvard
Yeah,
Medical
yeah.
School professor at
Just
Harvard
say
Med
the
School.
word.
Yeah, the H word. It's the H word. I taught at a university in Boston,
It
and
starts with
that's
the
I
letter H.
drives me crazy when I went to people in Cambridge used to say I went to school in Cambridge, and I would be like, oh, where Cambridge Elementary? um, just say it. Just say you went to Harvard. And I always thought it was kind of funny because they not only did I not even bother applying for undergrad because I never would have gotten an interview, I didn't. I applied for med school. They didn't even interview me. They were like, nope. So like not good enough to train, but good enough to teach the people training. So
No,
whatever.
you evolved. You
Anyway,
grew.
I did. I came back a different person to Harvard, I guess. But anyway, did that, and then Harvard was really important and is worth mentioning, not for the H word, but because I kind of hit my limit there of like I'm either going to be a department chairman or an NIH grant funded researcher. Like this is the path of academic medicine. Is this what I want? And I got to the point of getting an offer to run a huge trauma center in the U.S. and at the same time, one of my good friends from training back in Oakland, who had been in Portland ever since then, um, reached out and said, "Hey, you and Ann ever think about coming back to the West Coast again? We're going to have an opening. One of the partners is retiring in our group." And I went and looked basically at the same time at this sort of like pinnacle academic job, and then a community hospital gig, just cool people, no publishing, no other responsibilities, like show up, see patients, take care of people, go home, out in Portland. And that was another really pivotal moment as I was like, yeah, I don't really know exactly what I want to do professionally, but I know I don't want to like be in charge of a bunch of people and be an administrator and be a department chairman.
Yeah.
So I bounced from academics. We bounced from Boston and moved out to Portland about almost 10 years ago now. And that was just a real commitment to spend more time with my family, spend more time outdoors, spend more time on things that really bring me joy and not on things that I thought would bring me joy by virtue of bringing me external validation. So that was a really pivotal move, was sort of the out of
Chateaubriand,
academics.
man.
Yeah, Chateaubriand. Um, and then things just kind of flowed and evolved naturally to the point where I left emergency medicine and started doing more preventative, personalized care. But that was, that was a totally unforeseen development about 5 years ago. And just now I don't
I was just
work in
looking
the
at
ER
notes, and that's
anymore.
where I wanted to head next was, precision medicine, epigenetics. We've got on here this mind, body, spirit, psychedelics, brain health. Where's your focus and your passion now? And I do want to dig into epigenetics because I know that this is something that you know a lot about and you're deep in it. And I know a lot of people in the audience have heard about epigenetics. They've probably heard the word. It may not quite understand what it is and why it's so important and pivotal now in terms of our knowledge of sort of how this machine works and what we can do about it. So I do want to dig into that if we're ready for that.
Yeah, for sure. Where do you want to start?
Let's go start with precision medicine. What is that?
Hmm. So maybe I'll take a little detour first. Our tendency is to want to label things, right? Whatever it is. That's a tree. That's a mechanic. That's precision medicine. That's a coffee cup, right? This is how we make sense of the mystery of all the things around us. Is our brain, our mind likes to categorize things, right? And it's a normal human instinct, and it's part of our conditioning. I don't think any of the current definitions around medicine really truly encapsulate what it is that I think I do and I strive to do. So I think that there's functional medicine. I think there's integrative medicine. I think there's precision medicine. There's personalized medicine. There's concierge medicine. There's elements of all of those things that I like to incorporate into my practice. At the end of the day, I want to help people discover what true health is for them so that they can live joyful, vibrant, connected lives. That's not a description of a medical subspecialty. Um, to me, I'm just creating one because I can't find one that I like, and I'm calling it, at least internally, although now I guess on a podcast. To me, what I practice is conscious medicine.
Gotcha.
It's
I love that.
a combination of lifestyle intervention, data-driven insight, a focus on emotional and spiritual and community and connection that is as important as your VO2 max and your body fat composition and what your lipid profile looks like and how you're looking on your coronary CT angiogram, right? Everything it's a level playing field. There isn't a hierarchy. All of these things are connected, and we know they're all equally important. And you can dive deep into having like the best body fat percentage and be super muscled with like a high appendicular lean muscle index, and like you're jacked, and yet you don't sleep, or you don't have deep, meaningful friendships, and you're not going to have a joyful, connected, and vibrant life. You're going to be excelling in one or two of these categories. So, long-winded way of saying, each one of us that discover what true health is for you, that is personalized. And sure, personalized medicine is really just saying, here's your answer to your question, Greg. Personalized medicine is saying what we all learn in med school in like the first week, and then we all forget the next day, which is that population level statistics are really useful for looking at populations, but you can't extrapolate them to individuals. And then we immediately turn around the next day and go, oh yeah, we're totally going to use this with individuals because it's easy, and it's our humanness, and it's beautiful, but simplistic. Is, let's say that medication A reduces the risk of disease B by 10% in a population. It doesn't tell you that could be because it reduces it by 30% in some of those people in the population, and it actually increases the risk in another 20% in that population. So personalized medicine is really a philosophy around looking at designing a specific health plan, whether it's lifestyle or it's medication or whatever other interventions are involved, that fits an individual. And because of biometric tracking, because of epigenetics, genomics, the ability to actually look at individual's operating system and say, this is going to work well for you, or even better, we think this is going to work well for you. Let's try it and track, and we can tell you if this works for you. That's what personalized medicine is it's coming up with an individual plan. So while I offer a lot of the same services I offer all of the same services for all of my people, who again, I'm going to use people because they're not patients. Like, patients is like a small subset of what makes a human, right? So for all of my people, the services offered are the same. The plan is completely individualized and is different from one person to the next across the board.
Got it. And I think that's where things are trending. Yeah. Now, I mean, it's been that population sort of medicine for a long, long time, right? I think when we were growing up. But we hear personalized medicine, we hear precision medicine, we hear proactive, preventative, all the P's. And I liked what you said. We do label things, right? We like nice, tidy packages and words that describe them and everything else. But at the end of the day, it's true. People asked me, I was on a panel last week, and I talked about this, and a guy raised his hand and he said, "Well, how often do you?" And we were talking cellular medicine at the time, and he said, "Well, how frequently do I need to do this?" And I'm like, "Well, how high is high?" Right? I mean, I don't know. It's, how healthy are you? What's your lifestyle look like? What other, maybe, other indications or comorbidities or something that you may have. And, I'm not a physician, but like there's a lot of things that go into answering that question that need to be really personalized and dialed before you can give that answer. I mean, and it's say twice a year. Okay, maybe not. And, it depends on the person. And um, I think that's where things are going. And with all the diagnostic tools, you mentioned those, and I'd love to get into that a little bit with genomics and biomarkers and epigenetics and all the wearables and things like that are going now. We've never had better and, more access to real time data on how this machine is functioning to give guys like you in your particular trade craft better tools to help make guys like, the people listening, perform and optimized at a higher level, right? Especially as we start to age, right? At 57, I'm super dialed into this conversation.
Hmm.
And I think anybody listening who's crossed the Rubicon of 50 years of age is like, say that again. Let me hear that. No,
Yeah.
what? Not that we're not speaking to people who are younger, but look, let's face it, we get a little older, we start paying a little closer attention to all those things we've been told for the last 30 years.
Yeah, and never too late to start paying attention.
100%.
Also never too early, so you can't go wrong. Just start paying attention today.
Some point. Yeah.
And
So talk about
yeah, I mean,
diagnostics.
I'll talk about diagnostics. I think the other thing, just to maybe put a bow on the personalized aspect, is, when we start off, and I work in a team based care model, so I work really closely with a care coordinator and a health coach, Stephanie and Trey. And just a shout out to Trey, who's an amazing health coach and an amazing human. One of the things that we start off with early on, like we just had an introductory call with somebody who just started working with us today, and it's, what are you hoping to get from working together? Right? That's like, have you ever seen I've never seen a primary care doctor who asked me what I wanted out of my health.
No, but where my brain went
Um,
when you said that is, do people know? Do they have good answers? Are they ready?
well, and the amazing thing is, most of the time, yes, you gotta shut up and listen and not pipe in with a multiple choice question. But sometimes it's, you know, I want to, we'll start easy. I want to lose 10 pounds. We're like, okay, well, that's probably not really what you want. You want to lose 10 pounds of fat, or you want to lose like some fat and gain some muscle. Like, we'll dive in, but okay, body composition. Like, you're not happy with the way that your body looks. Amazing. We can work on that. Sometimes it's, I want to be able to run the Boston Marathon next year. It's an athletic event, right? And that's probably a good one to. I mean, sometimes I want to have deeper relationships with my friends, or I want to do more things outdoors, or I want to model behavior for my kids in a way that they grow up to have health be a really important thing. I want this legacy in my home. And sometimes it's like, I just don't feel good. I'm dizzy and I'm tired, and like, just things aren't working for me, and I want to feel better. But in the same way that you wouldn't, like, I've worked with a lot of athletes. If somebody comes to me and says, "Yeah, I race Formula One, and that's what I want to optimize my athletic performance for," if I go ahead and create the same program for that person as somebody who wants to win a powerlifting competition, right? You would never, right? And
No.
and that's personalized medicine. It should be that simple. Yes, there are some table stakes things. Peter Attia, who really, I credit with bringing a lot of just like the popular consciousness up around preventative medicine, right? He talks about the chronic diseases that kill most people in Western society, and yes, it's dementia, cardiovascular disease, insulin resistance, and diabetes, and cancer, and screening tests for those sorts of things on the diagnostic side, generally for people of the right age and demographic, are going to be useful across the board. right? Like most people, you want to know if you carry a genetic risk for dementia. That's going to be actionable. Some people feel strongly that if they know they have that genetic risk, it's going to cause significant anxiety and it's going to maybe even increase the chance that they develop that. Not, I'm not saying that that's evidence based, but that's a concern. And for that individual, um, I'm more of the belief that knowledge is power personally, but I also believe that people can decide what they want to know about their health. Um, and for some people, they go, "Yeah, I don't really want to know the risk. Just tell me what I need to do to decrease the risk, and I don't want the testing." Great, if that's where we need to meet to be able to meet you where you are, amazing. Let's do that. Then there's additional diagnostics that are going to really yield the sort of like the beauty of what makes us different, right? So epigenetics, genomics, heart rate variability, sleep architecture. These are where we can get really nuanced with people, and we can dive in and say, well, your issue is that you really wanted to work on your sleep. Amazing. Let's do a continuous sleep study at home for the next 6 weeks. And let's work on your sleep hygiene and let's work on supplementation or diet. And let's actually iterate on this and improve your sleep in a measurable way. And maybe you need some assistance. Maybe you have obstructive sleep apnea. Maybe there's something else going on. Right. But the diagnostics are really going to change depending on what the priority is for someone. One of the mini pet peeves I have with sort of the executive physical model is you get your cardiovascular screening. And your cardiovascular screening may be a CT calcium score or an angiogram, plus it's a treadmill test, plus it's another, it's a nuclear medicine test, or it's an let's say it's a treadmill test and it's an echocardiogram. Not everybody needs a treadmill test and an echocardiogram, and not everybody needs a CT coronary angiogram, right? How about meet with somebody first, decide where the highest yield is going to be and pursue that, and then you can expand from there. So I don't like to bludgeon people with diagnostics. I really want to get to know somebody first. Some things we're going to order on everyone. I want to know your body composition and your blood pressure, and I want to know your lab testing, and I want to know epigenetics and genomics. But I'm not going to put somebody through a ton of expensive diagnostic testing that's time consuming for the person without thinking it's going to change something or could potentially change something about our management.
Gotcha. So find out a little bit more about their health profile, what's going on, what makes them tick, what their goals are. And then start working into which diagnostics might be applicable for that. It's interesting because we in a previous life where I was at the cellular medicine longevity clinic, it was pretty standard for everybody, right? You did a TruD test, you did HSCRP, TNF alpha, IL-6, you did oxidative stress, DNA damage, neurotransmitters, hormones. Everybody got sort of the same thing. It's sort of, let's see where you are from a baseline, and then let's use that macro to micro, sort of baseline data in a longitudinal way to see what we can do to make improvements and or tweak and optimize and see how well the strategy and this plan that we've recommended is working. And it feels like the right thing, or it feels like a logical way to go about it. But I'm hearing something, this is even a little bit more dialed. Well, maybe a lot more dialed at the individual layer.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that I'd say yes, and so when it comes to advanced biometric testing and like laboratory testing, I've got a pretty low threshold to get an advanced laboratory panel on every single person that I'm going to meet with. I want to know what your apolipoprotein B is. I want to know what your hemoglobin A1C, your fasting insulin.
Sure.
I want to know your hormone health, etc. When it comes to and zero qualms with sort of standard intake testing on that level, epigenetic testing, pace of aging, systems age, for sure. When it comes to the more advanced testing, which is typically imaging as a whole, but it doesn't have to be, there's often not a lot of pre-testing consultation and consideration about whether or not that's actually going to be a useful test for someone. So I'll give you two examples. So one would be the blood-based biopsy testing, right? So everybody's heard about early cancer screening through blood testing. There's a few companies out there that are doing it. I'm not going to name the specific companies because I don't want to give them free advertising, and I just like not naming companies anyway. But there's companies that can do this. Google search it if you've never heard about it. And they basically look for patterns of methylation in cancer cells that will be detectable by the blood. And some of them will tell you that we can detect 18 different cancers, some of them about a dozen. These are the sensitivities, specificities, etc. What they don't tell you is the negative predictive value is outstanding. So if you get one of these tests and you don't have cancer, no cancer signal detected on the test, great. Very unlikely that you have one of those cancers at a stage that's advanced enough to detect it. It's not, none of them are perfect, but pretty good test performance. If you get a positive test, more than half of the positive tests are false positives. And you're looking at an exceedingly rare number of positives, which again, like, this is why, even though it's not a terribly sensitive test, the negative predictive value of the test, the likelihood of a negative being a negative, is extremely high because it's so rare. But the flip side of that is that a positive, that means, if 6 out of 10 people with a cancer signal detected on their test then need to go, don't have cancer, but then need to go have a PET scan or a full body MRI, all of the multiple repeated blood-based biopsies is the typical practice. So like every 3 months for the next few quarters, you're doing it again. You've introduced a lot of cumulative emotional and psychosocial stress
Wow.
on
That's what I
someone.
was thinking about. You go
And
home and tell your family, I got my test back, or don't tell the kids. Now you and the wife yeah, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of
And for some people, they go, I want to know. I I can handle it if it comes back. Thank you for letting me know that half of the ones that come back positive aren't positive. We'll step through it and I'll work it out. I really want to know. This is really concerning to me. Maybe I have a family history, or maybe this is just the one thing I want to be super dialed in as early screening as possible, and I'm willing to take that risk. Great. How many of the places where people are getting these tests done have these conversations with their people before they get them done? Likewise, full body MRI. I use this a fair amount with many of the people I work with. You have to have, in my opinion, you have to have the conversation up front, which is, you're going to have disc disease in your neck. You're going to have disc disease in your lower back. You're probably going to have some cysts on your kidneys. You'll probably have a benign tumor like a hemangioma in your liver. You're maybe going to have some cysts in your pancreas, which are going to need to be followed. We might find some thyroid nodules, which will need an ultrasound. You're probably, it's like nobody has a normal MRI, right? We accumulate, we're all perfectly imperfect to start with, and then we accumulate these issues as we age. And it's just about having a really informed conversation with someone. So when I say personalized diagnostic testing, I don't have those conversations around sending your epigenetic age or sending your advanced cholesterol panel or your inflammatory panel. Like, sure, we're going to do that. I don't have that conversation about checking your blood pressure. But if we're going to start doing some of these additional tests, either tests that have some risk associated with performing them, or tests where the result of the test could be really psychosocially stressful for someone, I think that's where it needs to be personalized, and it's not just a one size fits all. Here, line up and come to our center, and we'll get everything done in one day. Is that a test you even want to be getting?
yeah.
I think it's really hard to figure that out as a consumer, as a layperson, without
It's
some
impossible for
some
most
advice.
people. Yeah, no, you can't. And nor should they be. I mean, yeah, goes back to what you said your approach was, right? Like, I you want to be more um you want to get to know this person a little bit better, right? Before you, and so I love that. I want to ask you about epigenetics, because
Hmm.
it's a lot, it's all the rage. A lot of people are, we go to conferences, people come up, and I was just at one, and surprisingly enough, there was probably 100 people in the room, and I said, how many people here know their biological age? I would have thought 20-30% of the room would have put their hands up, like two people, which is
Wow.
interesting
Hmm.
because it was on health and wellness, and I was kind of shocked, or they were just being shy or playing stump the chump. I don't know, but whatever. That was, but epigenetics, people come up, and I'm sure you get this too. Hey, I'm 13 years younger biologically than my chronological age, or what if if I'm 8 years older, and all this kind of stuff. talk to us at first. Define epigenetics for people listening, right? What is it in lay terminology that people go, oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense. I finally understand it. We can do that definition. And then secondly, how are we using epigenetics? Touch a little bit on the clocks, and then talk a little bit about Dunedin pace, if you will, and sort of what that means in this biological age. Because everybody loves a scorecard, and I'm not poo-pooing that. But what I
I
am
am.
saying is you do it. You get to do it. But let's do that real quick, because I know it's a lot of people that are out there that are interested in, if they find this and they're going to listen to this, they're dialed into these kind of conversations. So help us with that.
All right, I'll give you the way I would explain epigenetics to my 13-year-old is we all have our DNA, and our DNA is made up of individual base pairs of adenine and cytosine and guanine and thymine, right? Like this is our code.
This is
So
the
you could think of
hardwired
it,
stuff.
yeah, if you want to think about it as ones and zeros, right?
Yeah.
It's just what is your DNA? Unless you get a bone marrow transplant or you have CRISPR technology or something else really, where you would know is going on, you are stuck with that DNA for good. That DNA is the same DNA in your eyeball as it is in your brain, as it is in your heart, your liver, your kidney, your skin, your bones. Every cell in your body has the same DNA. Epigenetics overlies the genetics. So it's on top of the DNA in the same way that the epidermis, the skin, is the outermost layer of the skin. Epigenetics is the process by which we express or silence our genes. So epigenetic modification or epigenetic expression is happening in every single cell in our body. It's why your skin cell is a skin cell and your brain cell is a brain cell, even though they all have the same DNA. So we can silence genes that are associated with a risk. So let's say silencing a cancer gene could be a really great thing to do. You could do that through prolonged fasting. There's lots of ways that you can silence pro-cancer genes. Or you could overexpress a pro-cancer gene or silence a cancer-suppressing gene, like start smoking a bunch of cigarettes, and you're going to increase your risk of cancer. So I think epigenetics to me is the scientific study of nurture as opposed to nature. So nature is your DNA. Everything we do in our life affects the epigenetic expression of our DNA. And that translates into not only disease risk, it translates into phenotypic, so what we look like. So we all know somebody who is 60 years old but looks 80. And we all know somebody who's 60-year-old who looks 45. And that's this concept of biological age is, well, how old are you really? We know how old you are chronologically based on your birth certificate or your driver's license. But how old are you biologically? Are you aging at a rate that is going to make you biologically, functionally, phenotypically older or younger than your chronologic age? And the beauty of this is not just a curiosity over how old am I biologically? And then when you said, oh yeah, everybody loves a score. I don't love a score because I think getting a score, like I'm 50, I said it already. If my biological age is 53, that's not really actionable for me. And if my biological age is 46, also, I mean, I'd prefer it to be 46 too, but it's not actionable for me. What's actionable for me is how quickly am I aging and what is my rate of aging now? And what might I be able to do to affect that rate of aging? And can I determine if something I'm doing is having a positive or a negative effect on how quickly I'm aging? And why do I care about aging? I'm super comfortable with mortality. I'm going to die. This instance of Mike will not exist forever. And I'm way more focused on living my best, most connected, joyful life today than I am on living to 95 as opposed to 90. Yet, every major disease, heart disease, cognitive decline, dementia, diabetes, cancer. If you look at the risk factors for those diseases, down in the low level is things like smoking and a standard American diet and obesity, etc. And then orders of magnitude, 10 times, 20 times higher than that is the risk is aging, right? So aging drives all of the chronic diseases of mankind and womankind. And if we can modify our rate of aging, we can likely live disease-free for a longer period of time, which sounds excellent, I think, to everybody. If, plenty of places you can walk in a room and say, who wants to live to 100? You get some answers. Okay, who wants to live to 100 in a wheelchair for the last 20 years? You get different answers. But if you walk in a room and say, would you like to live your life disease-free? I would wager that everybody says yes.
Yeah.
Right. That
Yeah.
just, and not about how long you're living, but do you want to live disease free? So that's why I'm personally, as a clinician, why I'm interested in biological age. I'm interested in how quickly we're aging, because if we can modify that, we can live longer, healthier lives, but even more so, just healthier lives, less disease.
I love this. And I'm going to say this, and I think it's saying the same thing, but I need you to, call BS on it if not. So I say a lot that, before we can talk about aging, let's define it, right? Let's all agree what this definition of aging is. And I say it's the functional decline of a living organism over a period of time. Like, there's a pretty generalized, basic, universal kind of definition of aging. And when we're talking about what we hear a lot about now is the period of time part, right? 120, 130, all this long. That's what makes headlines. But where I think we need to be focused, and where I'm focused, and I know it sounds like you're focused, is on the functional decline part, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's that if we can slow, or let's say it this way. Let me say it this way. If you cannot slow the functional decline of this living organism down, then the period of time part doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter, right? Because even if you can extend it, nobody's signing up for it. That's the wheelchair, the last 10 or 20 years. And if you can't slow it down, then you're not going to live longer anyway, because the functional decline is part of the OS. It's part of the operating system that this thing, is. We figured out better now how it works, and some things that we can do, like with epigenetics, as indicators of things that, we accelerated or decelerated in our rate or pace of aging. But we have to be focused on the functional decline part, slowing and or possibly reversing the functional decline on our cognition and our immune function and our mobility and our vascular function, our sexual wellness, our aesthetics, all of those systems. If we can slow the functional decline, possibly even reverse it, then it feels like we can start having a conversation about period of time. But that goes to the heart of what you're saying, I think, which is how many people want to live disease free? Well, if we can slow the functional decline of this thing down, we're on the right path. Does that make any sense?
I think it makes a ton of sense. I mean, I think the one area that I think gets sticky, and I know you're not crossing over this line, this imagined line for me, is, let's say let's just talk about me. Let's talk about me for a second, Greg. So if I were 45 pounds of fat heavier and 10 pounds of muscle leaner, and I were which was me maybe like 8 years ago, and I were the exact same age as when I lost that weight and put on muscle, I'm living such a happier place because my health has improved. My biological age came down. Clearly, I wasn't testing back then, but clearly my pace of aging reduced tremendously, because we know that things like obesity and insulin resistance will increase your rate of aging. I don't care personally so much about whether that translates into living a really long time. And I know, longevity CEO, I got you. And many people are interested in longevity. I'm interested in living your healthiest life right this moment. And to me, that translates into longevity,
Yeah.
but it's making a clear distinction of, let's lead with optimism and enthusiasm and connection and love and health today, as opposed to, if you don't do these things, you're not going to live a long time, or you're going to live a long time and be unhealthy. And I feel like that is rampant in the wellness longevity space, as this sort of like fear and scarcity model of, well, and this is why people go, I've been listening to these podcasts and reading these books, and there's, it seems like I need to do this many hours of cold plunge and this much sauna, and I need to take these supplements, I need to do this workout, and I have to make sure I get all this stuff in. And it's like, no, 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 no. You're being scared into health. Like, take a step back. What do you really want?
I,
And I mean, by itself, there's your journaling question every morning. What do I really want? and just stop it there. But if in my area of expertise, what do you really want with your health?
Yeah. What do I
And
really
I,
need too? I love that
mm-hmm,
question. I, I did this reel. I just got to jump there for a second. I did this reel recently where I scoured Instagram for all of these different like longevity videos, reels, and there was a person saying if you brush your teeth a certain way, or if you do this in the morning, for 20 minutes, or if you sit down and get up and sit down and get up, and it's a predictor of how long you're going to live. And if there was just all this stuff, everybody from Peter Attia to David Sinclair to you name it, all to just people on the internet. And I mixed it all together, and I was like, people say, like longevity's, complicated, or something like this. And then these reels kind of go back to back to back. To your point, I was trying to make a point. There's so much noise out there, and
hmm,
people talk about, well, sauna is going to improve longevity. From my knowledge, there is zero evidence that suggests that regular saunas are going to have any impact on your longevity. I'm with you. I said it maybe one or two episodes ago. Longevity is not about living to 120 or 30 or 80 or whatever. Longevity is about being healthier longer, if that's what you want, and that's mind, body, spirit, physical. That is all of that. And we know I talk a lot about mindset being key and critical. You want a vision of the future? Hey, let's say you're a hyper apex predator alpha. You go, I'm going to 120, period. That's it. That's my number, 120, right? And you are stuck on this number. Then that's your vision. You need a strategy to get there.
mm-hmm.
What you just talked about, human connection, the love, the physical part of it, the mental, the emotional, all of those things are the only way, in my opinion, you're ever going to get there, right?
Yeah, you're not going to get there with just like a really good supplement stack and a
No,
couple of trips
and
to
some
get
cold
some
plunges
regenerative
and stem
medicine.
cells. Yeah.
And yeah, yeah,
No,
it's
no,
not
no.
going to do it.
It takes it all. I call them puzzle pieces. People say, oh, well, stem cells are going to help you live longer. No, no. They're a repair mechanism in the body, but they'll help with inflammation. But that's one piece of the puzzle. There's a lot of pieces of the puzzle, and you got to put the whole damn puzzle together in order to do this. And it happens to be that we need to be doing anything that remove stress in your life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's meditation or breath work or grounding or taking long walks or whatever, cold plunges, whatever it is that works for you. You have to be incorporating those things in there. And I love the way you said it. I want you to live happy and joyful now. And if you can do that in the present, that I think is how you start to get there.
I mean, that just works. We're all on borrowed time, Greg. Like, if we, none of us want to accept the fact that we have zero free will in determining how long we live, right? You can live the most joyful, connected, vibrant, centered mind, body, spirit, emotional community life possible. And you could still get in a plane crash and die.
Fair.
And you could still,
Yeah.
have some freak accident where, you're on the east coast of Florida away from a hurricane on the west coast, and a tornado picks you up and kills you, right? We don't have any choice in how long we live. We have a lot of choice in living our healthiest moment today. And if we're doing that, and the universe hasn't, or God, or whatever your belief system is, has in store for you, that we're going to spare you the plane crash or the tornado or whatever else, living your best and healthiest, most joyful life today will translate into living your best, healthiest, most joyful life tomorrow,
Yeah.
and the next day, and the next day. But at the end of the day, every day is a gift. And I don't focus on, hey, here, what's your, like, and I recognize it. And I'm not trying to sound like I'm judgmental around it. When somebody says I want to live to 120, I go, that's amazing. Like, you have a clear vision of what you want. Fantastic. For me, the irony of saying I want to live to X age is like, I want to be 6'9", right? Like, I'm 6'1". I don't actually want to be 6'9", but it's as silly for me to say I want to live to 120 as it is for me to say I want to be 6'9". Maybe I'll live to 120. Maybe I'll start growing in the next few years. I'll get a second spurt of puberty. I don't know, but it just seems fantastical, right?
Yeah.
And not that humans can't live that long. I actually think that medicine and the scientific advancements that are happening, we may very well see a prolongation of the average lifespan in the United States, it's going in the wrong direction right now. That's
Right.
a different story. Um, but why focus on that? That's for most people, we're having these conversations. People are in their 40s to their 60s, maybe 70s. That's 80 years from now. Like, do you want to fill every day of your life with things you don't enjoy that you feel like you must do so that 80 years from now you can like break the tape at the finish line? Like, let's just back it up. Focus on now. Let's make now as good as it possibly can be. And guess what? You're taking care of the chances of tomorrow being as good as it possibly can be by doing that.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that. Um, I want to make sure that we're hitting all of the points that we, is there something there that you want to put a fine point on? Because I feel like we hit precision medicine and epigenetics. And I mean, there was brain health and,
Yeah, I think the only thing that was left untouched there that you had asked about that I'd put a point on is just the concept of biological clocks, and just
oh,
that
yeah. Yes. Thank you.
yeah, with biological clocks, there's multiple generations of these clocks. So the first ones, you go back to like 2013. They were really good at telling you how chronologically old you were, which doesn't have much bearing for wellness and health, but had some utility in things like forensics. And there were other times where you would want to be able to objectively tell how old someone was when you didn't know their age. The second generation clocks were pretty good at biological aging, pretty good, but they weren't great, and they were pretty good at disease prediction. They weren't really responsive to interventions that we know actually decrease your pace of aging and decrease your biological age. Really the only commercially available third generation clock right now is the Dunedin Pace, which was developed in Dunedin, New Zealand, and is a really remarkable clock because it doesn't give you how old you are. It gives you how fast you're aging. It gives you a pace of aging, typically from like 0.6 to 1.4. And 1 would be you're aging at exactly the same rate biologically as you are chronologically. And if you're aging at zero point 0.6, you're aging almost 1 year every what you're aging biologically 1 year every 2 years of chronologic age, which is amazing. And then if you're over 1, your risk of a chronic disease diagnosis or death in the next 7 years is substantially increased, not quite doubled, but about 55% increased.
Let me ask you a question about that. In the next 7 years, doesn't it matter? Does it matter what age you are when you take the test?
Not on the way that they developed Dunedin Pace, it doesn't. But
Interesting.
7 years later, if you're aging at 1.5 years, or let's say 1.25 years per year, you're tacking on almost 10 years of age, and it adds up. Um, I think systems age is another really good test in the sense that it gives you organ-based aging biologically. So that's leading to a lot of really interesting insights around, can you detect metabolic disease based off of someone's systems age, or cardiovascular disease, or other disease processes based on which organs seem to be aging at a faster or slower rate as compared to the other organs. So
Is it that good yet?
it's getting there. It's really close to that good. I definitely use systems age. I use Dunedin Pace. I don't use the other biological clocks. And this is sort of the like, hey, I don't like a score, because then somebody comes to me and they're bummed out because their score is high, and I'm like, well, that's great. I understand why you're bummed out, but why don't we see how fast you're aging today? And then why don't we work on some interventions to slow your pace of aging? Because you can't go back and change every action and every conditioning stimulus that you had over your entire life.
And
Right.
let's talk about the generational impact. We know now that epigenetics is inheritable 4 generations. Is that maybe more?
I mean, I don't know that we have a solid answer on the number of generations, but we know that that there are heritable aspects of epigenetics. I mean, one of the coolest ones is you can take bunnies and expose them to an environment where there are predatory hawks, and then the offspring of the bunnies that lived in an environment with predatory hawks will be scared of a hawk the first time they see a hawk or hear a hawk. You can take bunnies that were never exposed to hawks. The offspring of those bunnies don't really react to a hawk, because I mean, and like in the same way that you know maternal stress during pregnancy can increase the risk of childhood asthma. I mean, these are not genetic changes. These are all epigenetic changes. And there's epigenetics, I think, is, the biochemical framework to understand things like transgenerational trauma and so many of these phenomena that we don't have great explanations in, sort of traditional Western medicine with just the genomic model. But
Got
these
it.
modifications to the epigenome, not only are they heritable, but they're also modifiable. So you can also break these epigenetic modifications with things like stress resiliency, appropriate sleep, meditation, caloric restriction, avoiding hyperglycemia and glycemic variability. Like there are, and guess what? Here we come full circle to the things that actually extend life and lead to a healthier life, which tend to be lifestyle based and tend to be things like sleep, physical activity, proper nutrition, stress resiliency,
All the
community,
things.
emotional health.
All the things. So just to put a recap on it, the genes that were being expressed in, a mother with stress during pregnancy to create childhood asthma, those same genes can also be silenced through epigenetics, right? Through, well, epigenetically through proper sleep or nutrition or whatever to interrupt, if you will, that to modify it, right? Which is the good
Mm-hmm.
news, right? I mean, I
Yeah.
think that's a lot of the good news because we always thought for so long everything was just sort of this is the hand you're dealt. This is you got to deal with it. But epigenetics and that the science of epigenetics changed a lot of that. I have a quick question for you. Biological age takes longer in lifestyle modifications and behavioral changes to see a change in your biological age score than it does to see an uptick or downtick in Dunedin pace of aging. In other words, we
Yeah.
can see changes in our pace of aging in a shorter time frame, like 8 to 12 weeks, where biological age may take months and months and months. True or false?
My experience with that is true.
Okay, that's what I thought.
And I think the other way to look at that is, let's say I'm 50 and my pace of aging when I do my first Dunedin pace is 1. And then 12 weeks later, after doing some lifestyle modification, et cetera, cleaning up nutrition, who knows, all the things that can lead to a lower pace of aging. Now my Dunedin pace is 0.8. Okay. So if I'm aging at 0.8, a year later, I have de-aged, if you will, by, I'm averaging because I can't do 12 months in my head, but let's say zero point 0.2 years, right? Instead of aging
Right.
a full year, I aged 0 0.2. Guess what? My age went up biologically. Now it's a year later. So now I'm 50 years old in 8 months or 10 months, as opposed to 51 years old. That's a really trivial decrease in your biological age. What is far more useful for me as a clinician is, here's your pace of aging. Now let's see, I'll take a great common example. Somebody wants to take NMN or NR, right? An NAD precursor. They have no idea if that's helping their health in any way or their pace of aging. But what if you kept their lifestyle the same, either took them off or put them on, and gave them 8 to 12 weeks and rechecked? Is this affecting your pace of aging? For a lot of folks, they'll go, I don't really want to spend the money to take a supplement every day for the rest of my life if it's not making a difference on my pace of aging.
Sure.
Right. And I think there's lots of, but this is one of the things I'll do with people I work with if they come to me on 20, 30 different supplements is, why don't we take you off everything and let's look at your pace of aging. And then we can start to work on adding back in a targeted, personalized way that isn't just clouding the picture with a million different things that you're how much life are you wasting by just filling supplement bottle packets, right? I mean, you're the little medication boxes, right? I mean,
And
it's
and time on Instagram, watching all
yeah.
the
So I mean, I think what's really exciting, some of the disease prediction is really exciting that's coming out of epigenetics. The pace of aging, I think we're continuing to learn more and more about. And I love the idea of having a data-driven way of saying this is something that's working for you or this is something that's not working for you. So that's where I incorporate epigenetics into my practice. And at the end of the day, if I never tested your Dunedin pace, Greg, I still know that cutting out simple sugars
Yeah.
and moving your body in a meaningful and varied way over the course of the year, and sleeping, and doing stress reduction, however that works for you. All of those things are going to improve your biological age, whether I ever test it or not.
Right.
So, for folks who are more data driven and really want to drill in on this stuff, I am happy to geek out and get every last biometric together and like, well, let's go. LFG, amazing. For
S-
people who don't, then I still work with plenty of people who don't want to wear a wearable, who don't want to track and measure, who want to know what are the principles, what's the framework, what's the scaffolding to live a healthy life today, and we can work with that too. There's no one size fits all.
Yeah. Parting words. This has been amazing. I think cleaning up a lot of this stuff. There's so much confusion, and I hear this a lot. I was at that panel last week I told you about. A guy asked me, they say to me in the room, what's one of the actionable things I could do today to start improving my health? And I said, call Dr. Mike. I'm like, get a hold of this dude. And one of the guys already did, right? He's already reached out,
Mm-hmm.
and you're talking to him. What are some of the things like that? To me, this is the first actionable thing you need to do if you're serious, right? If you want to keep reading books and you want, which is great, and I'm not knocking it. I read them all the time. I read all of them. And I love it. I'm a knowledge seeker. I want to know more and more and more, and then bounce it off guys like you to say, is this bullshit or is this legit? But what are some of the things that you would leave people with? Mind, body, spirit, science. I want to throw science in there. Parting words. Sort of the last things you want someone to remember as we wrap this up.
Yeah. First of all, so much fun, Greg. I feel like we can, as usual, we could do this every
This
week.
could go on a while.
I think first and foremost, find someone who's knowledgeable in the area, who you trust, who you want to work with, and have it be the right relationship. I definitely turn down people who reach out to work with me because it's just not the right fit, and I want it to, and that's not a service to me. It's not a service to them. You want to have the right fit and find someone you trust. I kind of wish that I was like really crafty and handsy and like I knew how to fix my wife's car. I don't, and I wouldn't try by like listening to podcasts and watching reading a book and reading a blog or something, right? I take the car to the mechanic, right?
Yeah.
If you're not a trained healthcare professional and you want to really work hard on your health, find a trained healthcare professional who you
Right.
trust, who you have a good relationship with. It's okay. You're not like falling short of something that you want some help. So that would be number one. And then, what are the non-personalized things to that you can do to have a meaningful impact on your life today? I'd take each one of those categories and just do a personal audit, right? If I'm looking at my nutrition, what does it look like? Are there things that I just know, yeah, I could probably do a little better here? Physical activity. Am I doing something in that's supporting muscle growth and strength? Am I doing something that's supporting aerobic activity? Am I working on flexibility and balance? uh Emotional connection. What are my relationships like? Do I have like surface superficial conversations with everybody all day long and it's all small talk and nobody really knows me? Or do I have people I can actually say, hey, I'm having a hard time with this, or this meant a lot to me, or I'm scared of, or whatever it is, right? So like, where are your real connections, and are you showing up for people in relationship in the way that you want people to show up for you? What are you doing to sleep better? Because that one across the board, we know that's just a treasure trove of health. And then, what are you doing to manage your stress? It's a stressful world, period. It's not as stressful as it was when like a lion would pick us off around the fire at night, but our bodies don't know that and our brains don't know that. And we turn that same stress into the email that meets us in the morning or the line at the DMV, right? So what are you doing? Are you getting out in nature? Are you allowing the natural world to kind of de-stress you, which we know it does? I mean, there's a whole practice in Japan on forest bathing that your doctor can prescribe for you, right? It's like, are you going outside? Are you meditating? Are you doing breath work? Are you journaling? Are you praying? Do you have a men's group or a women's group or a mixed gender group? Like whatever. What's your way to kind of come back to center and de-stress? And if you're really going to focus on just nutrition, physical activity, stress resiliency or reduction, sleep, and like emotional and relational connection, you are killing it. And then, yeah, find somebody you trust in the healthcare profession to see, are you at, have you developed a chronic disease that could be treated? Are you at risk of developing a chronic disease that you could prevent? Those things are all wonderful things to work on. But at the end of the day, we are the stewards of our own health. And when I say we, I mean people, humans, not doctors. And um, until we really develop that sovereignty to own our own health and wellness, we're going to be playing catch up, and we're going to be watching, podcasts and listening to books and trying to figure it all out. What we need is the knowledge to be able to step into that role with confidence and authority to say, this physical body and mind, this is mine to take care of. And maybe you need some help figuring out exactly how to do that. No shame in that. That's amazing. That's what I live for, is professionally, is to be able to help people do that. But there's no greater gift than somebody telling me, I'm good. I know what I'm doing now. And is it okay if maybe we, just stay friends and don't work together the same way anymore? And I'm like, oh my God, you've graduated. Incredible. Right. That's like my greatest success. So those would be my parting words of advice.
I love that. I love how you start with a good, honest self-assessment, a good, honest audit, right? Like, how do I eat? But what I found was I did that, and then I tried, and maybe I'm going to call it half-heartedly, years back, a few years, like, okay, I'm going to eat better. But I wasn't really eating better. I was more conscious of what I was about to order, but I wasn't really, at the end of the day, the net, outcome, net result wasn't a nutritious, well-balanced lifestyle, from a nutrition standpoint. Same thing was true in the gym. I was going to the gym. I was working out. I was using a workout plan that a buddy of mine wrote for me in college or something. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. But I didn't have a plan, Dr. Mike. I did that audit. I knew I needed to make some improvements. I knew things needed, and this is sort of, way before the whole longevity thing. But I was like, I need a plan. And that's
Yeah.
when I started going out, and I'm like, okay, I need to talk to, I need a Dr. Mike, right? With this, I need to get a trainer, or at least someone who can help me design an age appropriate, workout thing for whatever goals I have. At 57, it's harder to stack on muscle mass, brother, than it was at 47 or at 37. And
Yep.
so that you need a plan. And I think that's like what you said there. That's when I kind of pointed. I was like, yes, have that honest conversation with yourself. Am I doing the things? Am I a relatable, knowable person? Do I have the human connections that I want and, really want and or need? Get that assessment, and then figure out how you're going to get a plan together. And it starts with contacting someone like you, or just get into action. Do one thing tomorrow that is on that list you need to improve, even if that means, ordering factor meal. I don't know, just anything to make a small
Good
improvement.
decisions. Yeah, good decisions add up, right? I
Get
mean,
a
it's,
win,
yeah,
right? And then stack another win on top of that one. And then before long, now you've got this robust plan, and you're measuring it to see how well it's working. You're looking at pace of aging, you're sort of dialed. And the difference that can make in someone's life, and what I've seen personally, and I know you see it every day, is within months, 4 to 6 months, you see people radically change. They're
yeah.
6 feet taller and bigger, and their smiles and voices and everything are coming through 10 times louder because they've just improved their health that much, in that amount of time by just taking plans. So I love that, I love that idea.
I gotta take us full circle though. Ready?
Do it.
Decide that you want to do something to improve your health. That's probably it. Right. In the same way that deciding that you want to live a different life when you're struggling with addiction or with any other issue, make that decision, right? And when you make that decision, man, there's so many qualified people and so many amazing resources out there to help you execute on that decision. But step one is, I want to fix my health today. And it won't get fixed in a day, but it also, like to your point, it can get pretty darn close to fixed in like 6 months. And I don't know how many people I know who have told me about friends, family who were planning on working on their health after X, Y, or Z thing. This deal closed, this kid graduated from college, this whatever, and dropped dead or had some significant disease develop in the interim. So I can't make, and this is part of the fit thing when I say I don't always work with everybody who reaches out to work with me, which is very true. If you're not willing to work and you haven't made that decision that this is something that's important that you want to lean into, it's not going to be a good result, right? Ultimately, at the end of the day, this has to feel important to you. And when it feels important, man, I'm going to lean in and, do absolutely everything in my power to help you get there. And so is Trey, and so is Stephanie. Like, we are going to support you as a community, as a family. And so this isn't an advertising meant for my practice. So will, I'm sure, a ton of other practices. Like this is, you're going to be able to find someone to help guide you. But if you haven't really made that step yet, all the advice in the world, all the podcasts, all the fad diets, all the stem cells, all the supplements, like you're not going to make meaningful change. You need to decide this is something that really is critical and critically important to you. And then you're going to be just shocked at how far you can go.
I think it helps too to have a why. I really do. I wrote about this today. There are days you don't want to get up at 5 and go to the gym. Days I don't. I'll speak for myself. Today was one of them. No, that's not true. I actually didn't mind. I got up. I got into the gym. Once I was there, the weights felt 30 to 40% heavier, because I track it, right? And so I'm like, well, this is the weight I worked out with last week in this workout with this, but now I feel like like it was just a struggle. Here's the point. I want to see my kids, my sons, I want to see this journey. My two youngest are in college. I want to see what's going to happen and where they're headed, right? My oldest son is this insane musician. He's, wicked smart. He's on this path now that he's going to kill it and blow it up. I'm going to watch that. There's some whys that I put along the way. And then most of the people who listen to me ramble at all know that, my father's health became a burden, or, failed, and he didn't want to be a burden to us. And that's the purpose behind wanting to help people live healthier, and realize there's options. And he did a lot of things to help himself, right? It was just, that was in 2010. We didn't have access to the same tools and technology and knowledge and even mindset that we have today. So that's kind of the underlying purpose and the mission, if you will. But that why, really, there are days I lay there and I'm like, I don't want to get up and go right now, or I don't want to eat well today, or I don't want to weigh this chicken breast and see if it's 180 grams. I just don't, right? But I think of, I want to see, grandkids being born, or I still have some things that selfishly I want to do, right? Like I want to go mountaineering with you, right? Talking about your upcoming trip. It's like, physically, can I do that? I don't know, but next year I want to be ready, right? So I just have these little whys that are the reasons that kind of motivate me to. So when I make that decision, I stick to it. To your point, when you say decide. And now this is the part where we do turn it into an advertisement, if you will, just because I want people to know how to reach you and how to get a hold of you and where they can find you online, or on the website or on Instagram or whatever. So tell people, because I know after this conversation, your email is going to blow up and your phone's going to ring.
Well, I've made it really easy for people. So you can find me at mikestonemd.com. And on Instagram, you can find me at mikestonemd.
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty straightforward.
Yep.
All right, Dr. Mike Stone, thank you so much. I knew this was going to be
pleasure.
awesome.
So much fun, Greg. Thanks for having me on.
It really is. Thank you so much for saying yes.